right? If you're going to look at stats and numbers, he has no shot at making this World Cup team. Having said that, I think when you look at the players that we have, the quality players that we have on the team, and let's leave Christian Pulisic aside for a minute here, I think there's no player that can create more opportunities within the final 30 yards of the field than Gio Reyna.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Inside American Soccer. I'm your host, Tom Bogert, joined as always by my friend and one of the greatest players in U.S. soccer history, a veteran of 3 World Cups and much, much more, Tab Ramos. Tab, you were just at the United Soccer Coaches Convention in Philadelphia this weekend. You were talking on a panel, people getting your expertise. How was it?
Oh, it was, as always, a ton of fun. I like not only, obviously, I had a couple panels. I had one with Eric Winalda, which is always fun to be with. And I had another one with John Harkes on Saturday. And Glenn Crooks was the moderator, so it couldn't have gone any better, really.
When you get to do these things with Harksey and Tony and you guys do a lot of things together, is it difficult to be like professional Tab and professional John at these things, or do you feel like you're going back to all of the memories that you guys have and just messing around like you're two friends, or is it easy for you to put on the blazer and get into like super professional mode?
No, I think actually we all have enough experience now that, we can get in front of a room and sort of stick to our points. John being a technical director type, me having a little bit of a coach's voice, and Tony a little bit of the same. Tony has probably more experience in terms of media and all that stuff. So when we work together this way, I think it's kind of easy. And plus, which I know we'll get to, I have my towel today, just in case. I want to make sure that no one takes it. I have it right next to me. I'm sure we'll get to this at some point.
That's fantastic. Well, if you're watching on video or listening along, maybe you hear a couple chuckles in the background because we have a special guest today. We are joined by my good friend Paul Tenorio, senior writer for The Athletic, and soon to be officially a published author. Paul wrote a book called The Messi Effect, How the Global Legend Changed the Future of American Soccer. That is available right now for pre-order wherever books are sold. And we'll dive into the book a little bit later, Paul, so put away your advertising boards and everything else you needed to get into. I just have one question. When I say soon to be officially a published author, does that bother you? Do you need something different? Are you going to start wearing overcoats with little elbow pads like a professor? What is this transformation like for you?
No, I have a corduroy jacket. I do. I have a corduroy jacket upstairs with the elbow pads. I'm gonna start having a pipe, I think, is what I'm gonna do. It's gonna become my new signature. Just a pipe wherever I go. No, really, when I hear it, I just get high levels of anxiety right now about the book. I wish I could be relaxed and like, oh, I'm a published author. Like, no, it's just I'm just filled with dread over this summer. So hopefully it goes well. But it was a lot of work that went into the book. So now it's just a matter of putting it out into the world and seeing how it's received from there.
I think it'll be received very well. And from getting to be close with you and seeing the other side of this process, he ain't lying when he says it's a lot of work. I promise you that. I can't wait to read it. Can't wait for people to get their hands on it. We're going to talk about that more a little bit later. But on today's show, we're going to start by going inside the notebook, giving the latest news around the U.S. men's national team. What's the latest with Josh Sargent and possibly Toronto FC? There's a lot going on there with Norwich City. We'll dive into that as well as a couple other things. Paul is here to give his 5 USMNT things to watch before the World Cup. It's always good to get a good perspective. I'm looking forward to that. And, of course, as always, we're going to go inside the locker room with Tab Ramos for another special story, and those are always fun. But let's start inside the notebook. First things first, Josh Sargent. Toronto FC made a bid of $18 million. Josh Sargent wants this move. Norwich do not want him to leave. The manager continues to come out and publicly say he is not for sale. He is not leaving. And Josh Sargent has skipped out on their last couple games. Norwich has sent him to train with the U21s. All along the way, Toronto FC are still pushing, hoping to get this deal over the line. A new detail that has emerged this week is that there is a relegation release clause in Josh Sargent's contract. Norwich City are in a relegation fight. And if they were to go down, if they don't sell him this winter, if they were to go down, then they will lose him for, if it's not free, it's a significant discount from what it is now. And that's just a lot of complicated factors. It's getting ugly between Sargent and Norwich. Sargent really, really wants this move. He's hoping for Norwich to acquiesce to this. And Norwich are saying, hey, you have a contract. We're in a relegation fight. You're not going. That's it. So, Paul, you've been reporting on the story with me as well. What is your perspective on Josh Sargent saga?
It's a game of chicken at this point. I think it's a game of chicken and who blinks first. And, there's a couple factors here. I think first of all is Norwich doesn't think they're going down. Since they've made the manager change, they were around 1.2, 1.3 points per game, would keep them safely out of the relegation zone. Obviously, they had an awful start to the season. So I think they're factoring a relegation clause into this battle a lot less than Josh Sargent's side. And then there's the fact that Toronto's bid is the third highest bid that we know about for Josh Sargent over the last 2 years. Cincinnati's bid was higher, and a Wolfsburg bid from Germany, the Bundesliga, was the highest this past summer, which Josh Sargent turned down, not Norwich turning it down. So, I think there's only one place that this goes if it's going to get done, and that's with a higher offer from Toronto FC. If they try to stick to 18 to 20 million, I think they're going to fall short of this transfer. And, frankly, I think, we have been around this game long enough to know that usually that bid gets pushed up and usually this transfer happens. But I think that Norwich is dug in right now, and I don't think they're going to make this easy on Josh Sargent.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think as we've looked over the years at many of these situations, because they happen all the time, right? It happened with Isak going to Liverpool this summer. There's normally no turning back on these. There's no turning back. So I don't see Josh coming back to Norwich at any point. Once you get sent to the youth team, I mean, that's a sign right there that likely the coach doesn't really want him in the locker room anymore. And I think, as Paul said, this is now it's the money game, right? It's how much can we get for him? Let's get the most we can get. Let's push as much as we can, and let's get the highest bid and get him out of here. I think that's what's going to happen.
I've been, I think, a little disappointed by the manager's public comments, and I do know that people around this deal are as well. He keeps on blustering like, he's not for sale, that's it, there's nothing there. And then he'll say things like, well, at this bid, he's definitely not for sale. It would have to make more financial sense. So which one is it? Is he not for sale, or do you want more money? And I do believe it's the latter. Like you guys are saying, logically, I think we all expect this to go. And maybe Norwich are slow playing this. I mean, not at this point, but because these negotiations have been going on since the beginning, like early December. And while the manager is giving a press conference last week saying he's not for sale, all of this, nothing, they're still negotiating with Toronto during that point. Like, sources have told Paul and I, the conversations are active while the manager is saying, no, he's not for sale. If he's not for sale, then you just stop talking. It is that simple. And some people thought that they were slow playing it from December to try to just stretch out how long they would have Sargent at the club, give them more time for a replacement, all that other stuff, until things really hit ahead when Sargent said, hey, I'm not playing. Accept this deal or let this move happen, because that's what he wants. He didn't kick up a fuss with the Cincinnati bid. He didn't kick up a fuss when they got relegated and there was offers from the Premier League, or at least very, very strong interest from the Premier League a few years ago. He's been a good soldier in the championship. He's been one of their most consistent players, definitely the most consistent goal scorer over his tenure at the club. So all of that, he was hoping that the club were going to be more collaborative, more cooperative. He just welcomed, he and his wife, their third kid. They want to go back to North America for family reasons, and that's part of the reason why, or that is the reason why, they didn't go to Wolfsburg in the summer, because they do love Norwich, and what they wanted was whenever he leaves, was to be back to North America. And Toronto FC came up with a competitive offer. Paul, maybe you're right. It could be a little bit higher. This is still a significant potential fee. Whether it is 18, and like you said, I don't think that's going to get it done either. But something in this ballpark, it's pretty significant. It's not as if Toronto are offering $8 million, right? So while Norwich probably want more, it's not as if it's just a ridiculous bid. So this is interesting. We'll see how it goes. And the MLS transfer window is open until March. So if Norwich really wanted to drag this out, there's still time. It's not the January transfer window closing date that would be the final day for this, because MLS, the registration is different right now. There is interest, or at least he's on a list of Nottingham Forest. I was told very clearly he wants Toronto and only Toronto. It's that simple. They need to get a deal done. So I'm curious to see where this goes in the next few days.
Three kids at 25. I hope he's negotiating with Toronto for a live-in nanny or something into that contract, that DP contract, because, man, I got 2 and I'm done at this. I can't. I couldn't do another one.
Not to be geopolitical here, but he does get to go back to MLS and Canada. free healthcare, right? There's a lot of bonuses there that aren't going to be part of the contract that he might get in Toronto that aren't in Cincinnati, San Jose, or insert any other.
There's always the benefit of playing in Canada and MLS. You get paid in U.S. dollars and you're living in Canada. Usually a good thing for the players there.
On to another player who, in that same summer where Josh Sargent almost went to FC Cincinnati, another player that was on their list is Weston McKennie. Weston McKennie continues to be in perhaps the form of his life, or certainly one of the best periods in his career. It's coming at a great time with his contract set to expire this summer. Ben Jacobs has reported that there have been some approaches from Premier League clubs about signing a pre-contract. When your contract is up, within 6 months, you are allowed to officially negotiate, and he could technically sign a new deal to join a new club in the summer. It's not there yet. I'm curious to see where this is going to go. But Weston McKennie, it's a really good time to be in this good form, not just for club, with the World Cup coming up this summer. From what I heard a few weeks ago, I haven't checked in on this again. There was no approaches from Juventus about a new contract yet, and I'm not really sure where this one's going to go and where Weston McKennie's future lies.
Well, there's an update today actually out of Italy about that Juve do want a new deal with Weston McKennie. They do want to re-up him. He's playing, like you said, really, really good football right now for them, and they would like to lock him up. We talked about the Josh Sargent situation. It's a matter of leverage, right? Norwich is looking at it saying, we have you for several years left on your contract. We're not worried about relegation. Josh Sargent's side is saying we have this relegation clause where we could go for much cheaper and we're in the relegation zone. That's a game of leverage. Right now, Weston McKennie's got a ton of leverage, right? He's got interest from, reportedly interest from England. We know he's had interest from Major League Soccer, and we know that there are teams in MLS that are able to put big money down for a player like Weston McKennie. And so he can go to Juve now and say, listen, I'm playing well for you. I'm probably going to play at the World Cup this summer and play well. The price isn't going down. He's in a really, really powerful position, I think, for a player. And so, what's the rush? What's the rush to get a new deal done? Make sure you're getting the most out of this moment.
Yeah, so Tab, I was going to ask you, if you were advising Weston right now, what would be on the top of your mind? Would you say, hey, let's play this out to the World Cup and banking on the market being strong and coming off of a fresh World Cup and being a free agent? Or if there's the right offer on the table now that say it's from England, do you just sign it? And then that also risks the locker room political side of things, where particularly with Italian clubs, you sign a pre-contract somewhere else, you seem to fall out of the rotation on the field.
Well, I mean, those are all good points, right? Because I'll start with this by saying that I'm shocked that Juventus let it go this long, right? Because as Paul's talking about leverage, Juventus has no leverage right now, really, except for playing time. That's all they have left. And Weston's having a good season. He's having a good season for a top club in the world. Juventus is a top club. And I'm sure he's got tons of offers. So I at this point, considering that, Weston can leave for free in the summer, I can't imagine that he's going to come back to Juventus, because I think the offers that he has on the table without a transfer have to be huge. And so, to answer your other question in terms of should he wait until the summer and see if the World Cup and if he does well, I would not wait until this summer. This is the time, the iron's hot. He has all the leverage. He likely has a ton of offers. Match all the offers up against each other and get the most money you can, and it's likely not going to be at Juventus.
And with that, and tap to your point, when Cincinnati were chasing him hard in the summer of 2024, I don't know the exact value of his Juventus contract, but Paul, you can jump in here. I'm fairly certain that Cincinnati's offer would be at least double of what he's getting paid right now, maybe even a little bit more. Maybe they were asking for a little bit more. And we all know the money in the Premier League is going to, at least has the potential to be more than Juventus. So not just the leverage of this contract being walked down, it's the financial leverage of, he knows if it's likely staying in Europe, or if it's going back to MLS, that would probably be where the most money is, because the only way you're going to convince him to come to MLS right now is with a huge contract. But the English offers are going to be higher than Juventus in all likelihood. So Paul, what else can you fill in on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's down to what Weston McKennie wants. Where do you put your priority? Is it just on money? Is it just on finances? Because if it's just about the money, you're right. It'll probably be MLS that has the highest financial offer. Is it a mix of the best financial offer with the best level that you can play at? Because, again, you're right. Premier League teams are going to pay more than Juve is, more than likely. Does he want to play Champions League football? What does he want out of the next phase of his career? Because he's entering essentially right now the kind of prime moment. You know, the next year or 2 or 3, we're seeing him play his best soccer. This is when he should be playing his best soccer. So where does he want to do that? You know, what's interesting about Weston is like there's two sides of his personality from a distance. And you know, I've gotten to know him a little bit, his family. I've done a couple stories. You know, I think that Weston has this kind of laid back personality and approach that can rub people wrong sometimes. But he also is the type of player that he likes getting pushed. He likes to kind of get that motivation and prove people wrong. And he's done it year after year after year at Juve. And I also wonder whether that factors into the back of his mind. That every preseason for the last couple of years, he showed up at Juve, no parking spot, no locker room, no locker in the locker room. Now he's like, oh, now you want me? Now you want to keep me around? Like, no, like when did you buy that loyalty over the last few years? Like that wasn't there. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see which way Weston goes with this. But, you know, my gut, I for a long time, I thought he's going to go to MLS. He's kind of the right guy. He'll go in this moment. But I feel like the way he's playing and kind of sensing that he's touching this next level of his quality, I wonder whether that'll just intrigue him of, you know, can I go to another big club and push this form to the next tier?
That's where I was at too. Like, sorry, Tap, like that. I would have expected, like 2024, I thought that since he was going to happen because they have all the money and all of that, and it just didn't. And now I would also say I'm assuming he stays in England.
No, I was just going to not repeat what Paul said, but follow on that because obviously I know Weston as a person as well, and I think he'll likely have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder about, you know, the EPL and the fact that he was there and that, you know, he'll want to prove to everybody that he can be a big player there too. And I would love to see that. I would love for him to be able to get a shot to go back to the EPL, and because I think he can do well there.
I would agree. Last one here. Senegal has won the AFCON, and why that ties into the national team is because Senegal are the penultimate opponent for the United States before the World Cup. As Tab here is rubbing the towel that the ball boys, the Moroccan ball boys, tried to steal from the Senegalese goalkeeper. There's too much to catch up on to try to even run it down here from the craziness of that game. That included a couple dubious refereeing decisions, the Senegal players leaving the field and going back to the locker room, there being a delay between the penalty called and stoppage time for Morocco by about 20 minutes to when they took the penalty. They tried a Panenka. They saved it. They go to extra time. Senegal wins. All along the way, the Senegalese backup goalkeeper is standing next to the goal at all times because it was raining during the game. And every time that Mendy would grab his towel and throw it back, the Moroccan ball boys or a Moroccan player would come over and try to steal the towel. So it ended up with the Senegalese backup goalkeeper just standing next to the goal, holding the towel. And it wasn't the attempts to take the towel got less and less cloaked. It just became like trying to do tug of war, and apparently the referees were just okay with this. This was all insane. Tab, go in any direction that you want from here because I don't even know.
I mean, I'll start by saying that it was a great tournament. You know, that we saw great teams. It was really a fun tournament to watch. How dynamic the teams were, the speed of transition of the teams, and the fun that it was to watch teams like Morocco play, because we've been watching Morocco of develop over the last 6-7 years into a little bit of a world power, right? They were at the top of their game, and we expected a tournament like this. And so, you know, unfortunately, Morocco being is going to be unfortunately, because of what happened, we start thinking about Morocco being a World Cup host, the next World Cup. The situation with the goalkeeper, for goalkeepers, it's always important for them to have a talent. And again, I'll take the disclaimer on me not knowing much about goalkeeping. Tony
more so not caring than not knowing.
Well, it's a little bit more of that, but I do know that the goalkeepers like to have their gloves just wet enough, but not too wet, so that they get a good grip on the ball, right? And so it's important for them to have a towel on the side of the goal. And I think, apparently what happened in the final was that, the not only the ball boys, but there were some administrators on the side of the goal fighting with the backup goalkeeper who was trying to protect the starting goalkeeper's towel from just being on the side of the goal. And apparently that the final was not the only game where it happened, that it had happened in other games that Morocco participated in. I think this is serious, and it's embarrassing really for Morocco that, a country that has come so far in terms of soccer, that has beautiful stadiums now, that has an amazing team, and that really had a great tournament all the way up until the final, although in the final they didn't play well at all. It leaves us with that image of what's going on over there. Is this serious? Are they serious about hosting events, or are they not serious? Because what happened with the goalkeeper situation and then with the Senegal team, walking off the field when the penalty kick was called, there were a lot of situations there that we can dig into that we could potentially talk for hours, because what happened with the Senegal team in the 97th minute when the penalty kick, there was a penalty kick on a 0-0 game final, 97th minute of the game on a +8, right? The referee had given an extra 8 minutes, 97th minute penalty kick against Senegal. Which was, you go to VAR, it was a penalty. It's a foul, it's a penalty. The Senegal coach calls his team off the field. The game was delayed for 15 minutes before, Senegal came back on the field. Thank you to Mane, because he pulled his team right back on the field and showed great leadership. The penalty kick was saved, but the whole thing was embarrassing. I can't believe we had to watch that, and it's unfortunate because the rest of the tournament was truly great.
Paul, moving past the final, just more focused on the United States' preparation for the World Cup. What will the Senegalese team do in terms of, obviously, they're really, really quality opposition, but in terms of preparing the United States and it being a big test right before the World Cup?
Yeah, well, first of all, shout out to Tom King and the team there at U.S. Soccer. They've been nailing their friendlies. They get Paraguay and Australia, who end up being group opponents, and now they pick the winner of in Senegal, and this was the goal, right, for these games, is you want the best World Cup opponents that you can get to prepare the team, right? Mm-hmm. And you want to face teams that play different styles. So they've been trying to schedule these friendlies from different continents, because at the World Cup, obviously, that's what it's all about. So, you're going to get a really good Senegalese team now that is going to be filled with confidence going into the tournament, is going to be coming and bringing their best, and I think putting on a show. They're a fun team to watch play, and I think the U.S. needs to play different styles of opponents. So it's going to be different. Playing that game in Charlotte as the like you said, the penultimate game, and then coming here to Chicago, where I live, and playing Germany, a much different style of football. That's what you want going into the tournament. I'm sure Pochettino will try different tactics, different ideas in both of those friendlies, different ways to defend, so that the U.S. is ready to go once the group stage starts.
I'm certainly looking forward to it. And like you said, this has been a really good run of strong friendlies dating back to, September, October, November. I think they nailed all 6 of those opponents. And again, moving forward in March and then in May, right before the World Cup. So that is credit where credit is due. It got a little easier as World Cup qualifying ended, so there's more opponents on the board. Well done to the USMNT. But it's time for a really quick break. We'll be right back, and we're going to get to Paul's top 5 most important U.S. men's national team things to watch before the World Cup. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Inside American Soccer with Tom Bogert and Tab Ramos, wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to Inside American Soccer. Let's get straight into it. Paul came with a little bit of homework now that he's soon to be a published author, so he had to be like a student here, like a professor. He's going to give us his 5 most important things to watch for the USMNT ahead of the World Cup. Paul, kick us off with number 5.
All right, number 5 is the backline battles. Things have changed with the way the U.S. plays, and that style fits kind of a wing-back system. So we've seen Max Arfston starting at left wing-back, left back for most of the last year. But Anthony Robinson is back. How quickly does he jump back into the picture for the U.S.? The assumption is, of course, he'll be the starter, but Pochettino's whole kind of ethos is don't assume anything. And so I'm not going to assume that Anthony Robinson just takes that starting job right back without a fight for Max Arfston. The other side is even more intriguing for me. You've got Serginho Dest, who seems like a perfect natural fit for that position, But with the way the U.S. is playing right now, Tim Weah also is probably slotted in at that position. So you've got Dest against Weah, and then Alex Freeman, who we thought would be another player to kind of provide depth behind Dest, but he started at the right back / right center back hybrid position in the last friendly for the U.S., played really well there, and then scored in the Uruguay game. So, there are some interesting battles at play here. I think it's very well worth watching how Anthony Robinson continues to play coming back from his knee injury and what happens in that Dest versus Weah matchup for the starting job at the right side.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think these are rich people problems that we're having on the wide outside back positions, right? They're good problems to have. I think we're very lucky to have 4 or 5 good players wide that could potentially compete for a position. All that does is make your starter better, whoever it's going to be. I can't imagine that we won't start the World Cup with J.D. Robinson on one side and Serginho Dest on the other. But having said that, they will have to be at their best to be able to do that, and that's a good sign for us.
Paul, really, really quickly, is there any chance that you could see Anthony Robinson playing left-sided center back in a hybrid way where he's able to get forward for his Mauricio Pochettino group, or don't even consider it?
Yeah, I mean, I think to Tab's point, this is a good dilemma, a good question to be asking. We haven't had Anthony Robinson healthy for a year as this formation change has happened, and Tim Ream has been the stalwart on that left center back position. I would imagine that Pochettino will want Ream on the field. He's trusted him so much since he's taken over. He's worn the captain's armband for the vast majority of games under Pochettino. But again, this gives you options. When you have all of your players hopefully healthy and playing well, now you can start to tinker. It's why we saw Dest starting with Freeman inside of him against Uruguay and against Paraguay, and it worked really well. So this is what we might see a little bit of experimenting come March of, what is the right mix of guys on the back line.
All right, number 4.
Number 4 is the number 9 depth chart. For me, when Balogun is healthy, he is the starter. The U.S. has looked different when he's on the field. They've looked more dynamic. They've looked dangerous. I think he is the best number 9 in the pool. But Ricardo Pepi broke his arm, and that has opened the door behind him. Will Patrick Agyemang get back into the picture? He scored a goal on the weekend. Is it going to be Haji Wright? Josh Sargent has kind of fallen off. He hasn't scored for the U.S. since 2019. Would a move to MLS change that? I'm not so sure. But we now have to watch all of those strikers behind Balogun to say, who, first of all, is going to be the third striker on the roster. But, does Ricardo Pepi once again miss out on a World Cup if he can't get healthy back on the field and scoring in time? To Tab's point earlier, this is a problem that the U.S. should be thankful for, that they, hopefully have 4 or 5 strikers scoring goals, and that could be options. But I'm keeping an eye on Agyemang and Haji Wright, especially over the next couple months.
Yeah, I would agree on that. If anything, we're happy to see that Balogun is playing really well. And he plays Madrid next, so that's it's not like he's going to go backwards from here. It's a good sign for us that I think the number 9 position is settled. I think in the end, once Pepi gets back on the field, let's not forget that it is an arm injury. Let's not forget that although he won't be on the field for a while, he likely will be training a little bit sooner because they will be able to protect the arm in such a way so that he can get training in. So fitness will not be an issue as it would potentially be with a lower leg injury. So I think Pepi and Balogun will go, and I think as a third forward, it's going to be a battle between Haji Wright and Agyemang. That's sort of how I see it at this point.
I could see them bringing 4, particularly given how much different Patrick Agyemang, the physicality is from the other forwards, and there is at least a possibility that you could play 2 center forwards with each other at some point. So I think that if we're getting down to like roster spots 24, 25, 26, probably value in bringing a 4th forward, particularly when one of them is likely going to be Patrick Agyemang, who is different from the others, rather than just, if it was Josh Sargent, Ricardo Pepi. There's enough similarities there where Pepi's been better with the national team versus there's a different profile here to change the game if we need it. But that's kind of going to be very, very interesting. These feel like the same questions going all the way back into qualification for the 2022 World Cup. No firm answer, but Balogun has certainly helped that one out. Paul, number 3.
Well, quickly, one small note on that. I think you're right that there's the window to do it with Haji Wright able to play winger, but Brendan Aaronson's form in the Premier League has changed the dynamic and the competition at that forward position when you're factoring in wingers and number 9. So It's interesting to see how that'll play out with how you think about your depth chart, because he was a guy who I thought was on the fringe and maybe is now playing his way onto the World Cup roster. Number 3 for me, we're starting to get into the more interesting stuff now, the goalkeeper battle. Is it a battle? I think we are saying it's a battle. I don't know that anyone in the U.S. staff is saying it's a battle. Matt Freese is the number 1. He's been the number 1 for Pochettino. But I did have a chat with Matt Turner earlier this offseason when he was at the MLS Media Day. And he seems intent, as he should be, on trying to play his way back into the goal for the U.S. men's national team for the World Cup. So what am I watching going into the March window and coming out of it? Matt Turner's form in New England. Does he get a shot to play one of those 2 games in March? Is this a goalkeeper battle, or is Pochettino putting Matt Freese in both of those friendlies and saying, you are the guy for the World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, those are all good points, obviously. I think if there's one thing that, actually 2 things that Pochettino has shown us so far, one is that he really trusts Tim Ream on the field, and 2 is that he trusts Freese to be his goalkeeper. And that's a good place to be when you're a coach. You're only 6 months removed from the World Cup. You've been trusting the goalkeeper. He's been delivering for you, and I don't really see competition for him going forward. Now, of course, the goalkeeping position, you're only a mistake or 2 away from losing your spot, right? So we have to see how Freese will do over the next 3-4 months in the league once the league gets going. But I don't see that being a hard competition. Having said that, I think there's a huge value to having Turner there. I'm rooting for Turner to have a good spring because he needs it, number 1, because potentially he could be off the roster if he doesn't, right? And I think his experience there, because he played in the last World Cup, will be a great value to have at the very least on the bench. And then it'll be a matter of whether Pochettino wants to go with Schulte, Brady, or even a Coach N as a younger player potentially for the future. So, but I think the number 1 position is pretty much sealed at this point.
Matt Freese has started each of the last 12 USMNT games and 12 of the last 13, and this is a year in which, 71 players were called up. This was a year of a lot of experimentation, a lot of change. The one spot that didn't change, or one of 2 maybe, with, like you said, with Tim Ream, one of the spots that didn't change was goalkeeper with Matt Freese. So he's got a huge lead, but I'm excited for Matt Turner. I think he's just going to be one of the best goalkeepers in MLS again. I hope that he gets right, because when he was leaving New England to go to England, literally the best or second best shot stopper I've seen over the last decade in this league, and the numbers back that up. And he went to England, and they tried to make him play with his feet too much, and his brain broke a little bit. So I'm excited to see the best of Matt Turner again. But Paul, go on to number 2.
Number 2, what is Weston McKennie's role in this U.S. team? This is a player that I was watching to say, could he be somebody who actually becomes the shock guy left off of the roster? Where is he going to fit into this? I think he's playing too well, first of all, to be left off of this roster.
Of course.
But with the way the U.S. midfield plays, I'm interested to see how Pochettino sees him. He likes to roam. He likes to push forward. He's not a guy who wants to just sit and kind of be disciplined. And so in some ways, he's actually a better fit to play as the second number 10 next to Christian Pulisic, which would put him into a position battle with Malik Tillman, Brendan Aronson, potentially Gio Reyna. I think there's some validity to playing Weston in that higher position. If you play with a true number 6 or another midfielder willing to sit behind Tyler Adams, I think you can actually get what Tyler Adams is best at on the field, which is allowing Tyler to roam and break things up, break up passing lanes, get stuck in, find ways to kind of press and cause problems. So for me, Tyler Adams, Tanner Tessman feels like the more natural fit. But that means Weston's in a real battle to start up in the higher position. Or does, when it comes down to it, Pochettino say, no, we're going with kind of a very similar midfield to what Greg Berhalter sometimes ran, that 3-man midfield, only with Christian Pulisic inside as the number 10 this time around. I'll be very interested to see what Weston McKennie's role is come March.
Yeah, same here. And, and if anything, Pochettino has surprised us time and time again. So I wouldn't be shocked to even see McKennie on the right side, right? We saw it with Musa. And Musa, I think, didn't belong there. But he was there. and McKennie has done it for Juventus. So it wouldn't be a complete shock that McKennie could potentially be on the right side. Having said that, I can't, in watching McKennie play, I can't imagine this team without him. I mean, he just has too much to offer. We've discussed before how he's likely one of the only 8s that we have that can end inside the 6-yard box of the opposing team. And there's a huge value to that. And so although he would, what we're saying here is that potentially he's competing with Tillman as that connector, distributor, creator, and he's not that. He brings another component to it as let's say a Bellingham would bring to Real Madrid, right? He's the guy that comes from behind and ends in the box for the header or to finish a play, and there's a huge value to that. So it's really interesting what Pochettino can do with this, but ultimately I think we need to find them on the field, and I agree with Paul that the best combination behind them would be Adams and Tessman.
So I think this is extremely fascinating, and I've kind of changed my own view on this as performances and form has changed, and we'll do this probably 10 more times before the opening game of the World Cup. But my initial contention was I don't think he makes sense as the partner to Tyler Adams for all the reasons that you guys laid out. He is not best if you're asking him to sit and hold a space. He's best when he's roaming and attacking, but so is Tyler Adams. And in this, would be better as like a central midfielder and an 8 in a 4-3-3 than in the 3-4-2-1 because there's one less central midfielder, and those players have to be so disciplined and considering the space and dominating the space. Whereas Weston is best when he can roam and fill in wherever he needs to go with his engine, his intellect, all of the things. And I would have said he doesn't give enough of an attacking punch to be like the second number 10 with Pulisic. I think I've changed my mind on that at this point because we're going to get a lot of attacking from Dest or Weah or Arfson or Robinson, and it's going to hinge on them. And I do still think that there's a slope where, McKennie isn't doing enough to be that second number 10. But I think at this moment I would have him in the starting 11 ahead of Tillman next to Pulisic.
Yeah, I mean, to Tab's point earlier too, when you have an attack that is based around wingbacks getting forward, getting on the ball in the overlap, looking to serve into the box, having a guy like Weston who's arriving late into the box, who's got a nose for goal on crosses, that might be the type of player you want out there on the field. So, part of it will be kind of what he wants out of the U.S. attack. I thought Tillman and Balogun played really well together when they were on the field. Again, another good problem to have, but one that has a ripple effect, because if you think you want to play Weston on the field no matter what and you play him deeper, Tyler Adams becomes a different type of player in midfield when he's paired with Weston McKennie. So, all of these seemingly little decisions or singular decisions, they're not singular. It affects everything about how the team plays and how each player's role kind of fits within the bigger picture.
And with that, what is your number one thing to watch?
Number one for me is the Gio Reyna situation. I'm interested to see how Pochettino approaches Gio Reyna in general. He's got about 400 minutes in the Bundesliga this year for Gladbach. That's the most minutes he's had in, I think, the last 3 seasons. He's only surpassed 600 minutes once since 2020, 2021. But even though he's getting on the field a little bit more, he still isn't producing. No goals, no assists. And yet he looked really good for the U.S. when he was on the field. How does Pochettino think about Gio Reyna and this team? What is he looking for from him on the club level when it comes to production and playing time, kind of with the messages that he's given to the whole group? And obviously, Gio does have this skill set that's always been so intriguing for pretty much anyone involved in U.S. soccer. I don't know what the right decision is. I don't know at all where this one is going to land. Maybe, Tab, you have a gut instinct of where this goes, but I think this is kind of the one player that you watch to say, is this the surprise that gets thrown into the U.S. team?
Well, I mean, and you threw out some great numbers, right? If you're going to look at stats and numbers, he has no shot at making this World Cup team. Having said that, I think when you look at the players that we have, the quality players that we have on the team, and let's leave Christian Pulisic aside for a minute here, I think there's no player that can create more opportunities within the final 30 yards of the field than Gio Reyna. And so that's a value to have. And this is why, a few weeks back, well, now about, a month and a half back when the World Cup draw came out, I said that the biggest person to benefit from the World Cup draw was Gio Reyna, because it's likely that in the World Cup we will have the ball and we will be on the opposing side of the field, and that's where Gio Reyna is good with the ball. The reason he's not doing well at his club, and the reason we keep saying over and over, when is Reyna breaking out? We've been saying this since Gio Reyna is 15 years old. The fact is, I've watched, I think, Gio Reyna enough now to know that when the game becomes long, when the game becomes, one one side of the field to the other. Gio Reyna can't get there. Gio Reyna is a half-field game, and we need to be dominating games to be able to use his quality. And I think because of that, I think there's a great value for him if there are games in the World Cup when we're dominating and we need a goal and we need to break a team down. It's nice for a coach to be able to look down the bench and find someone who could potentially be a solution to break down the other team. And I think that's where the value is. Having said everything else, we've been looking at Gio Reyna for years as a young player who has potential. At some point, you have to stop looking into the future and say, what can you do for us now? And he's had difficulties with every team in Europe for the last 4 or 5 years.
Since the Bundesliga took their winter break, he had started the final 3 games before that break. In their 3 games since, he's played a total of 26 minutes. So it is up and down. It feels like right when he was getting momentum. And like you said, Tab, if it's like we're doing a blind thing where you just look at the stats, player A, player B, it's not going to be him. But we all know what he's capable of and what he showed for the national team in November. And I think that as long as he's fit, he's going to be on the plane. I guess technically on the plane. He'd have to come from Germany. As long as he's fit, I don't really care what the numbers are. He's probably going to be on the roster. And we were talking in November, like, hey, is this guy going to start? Like, it's the fluctuation with Gio Reyna is crazy. Like Paul said, he just hasn't played that many minutes. And again, really, this is a smaller sample size because of how limited he's been on the field. But over the last year, in 740 minutes, which again is not a lot, he is in like the 25th percentile or worse in like shot creating actions, like expected goals plus expected assists, shots, progressive passes received. That means that he's getting on the ball and passing forward. Like his progressive carries, that play against Mexico, Tab, that we were talking about last week about when you think of a one highlight for Gio, it's that incredible run against Mexico. He's not doing that right now because he doesn't have he doesn't either have the capability or trust in his hamstrings that explosion is there. So I don't know. It is very, very fascinating. But no matter what all this evidence has stacked up, then you watch him against Paraguay, and it's like, oh my God, he could be one of the best players on the field. So it's a very big wild card here.
Yeah, I mean, and it's crazy. You mentioned it in passing. Tab and I kind of looked over it, but we shouldn't, because this has always been the thing with Gio over the last few years. It's staying healthy all the way till next summer. You know, he hasn't done that for a full season in 5 years plus now. So that'll be the biggest X factor with Gio Reyna. Does he stay healthy and on the field to even be in contention? And I hope he does, obviously. And then we can get to the form and we can get to what he brings. But the number one goal for Gio has to be staying healthy, staying fit, and building up over the course of the year.
It's easy to stay healthy if you don't play, though. You know, if you play very little, that part is easy.
Yeah, that's right. What do you want to do? You want to get on the field or you want to stay in contention?
As much as things change, they stay the same. I feel like a lot of these conversations we could mirror going, in 2021 and leading into the 2022 World Cup. But thanks for the top 5 there, Paul. Always great to get a perspective from somebody who, Paul, I think you've been at literally every single camp for how many years? A decade?
It's been at least, 5 or 6 years now. I mean, in 2020, there were no camps because of COVID, so I guess it goes back to before 2019. It's been a while.
Boots on the ground, capital J. But again, Paul wrote a book titled The Messi Effect, How the Global Legend Changed the Future of American Soccer. That is available for pre-order wherever books are sold. Paul, what was the journey in writing this book, and how many times did it change from, because these are things happening in real time, and you have your layout, your structure, the things you want to hit, the interviews you want to do, and then, no, I need to go back to Miami again because I need to do this, or I need to go to the league office. Like, how many times did things change and this process became really fluid in getting the final product?
Yeah, I mean, it was such an interesting process because of what you said. I mean, writing a book about something that's evolving in real time, like I knew writing a book would be difficult, and it ended up being the hardest thing I've done in my life. But choosing something that was happening in real time definitely increased the degree of difficulty. And I would say, in my idea of what the book was going to be for the first year, after about a year of reporting it, I had to kind of go back and scrap that idea completely. Just the amount of access I needed. It wasn't happening the way I wanted it to happen to make the book work that way. But in the end, I think it ended up making it a better book because this isn't a book that's just a season in the life of Inter Miami. This isn't a book that's a Messi biography. This is a book that's about where American soccer is right now and what Major League Soccer's place is in that ecosystem, and how Messi coming to MLS has kind of altered those dynamics, how it accelerated some of the conversations that were very necessary for Major League Soccer, and how MLS's decision-making process over the last couple of years and what its future looks like could end up changing its place in the landscape and how that would alter the landscape. So, I kind of look at this as a book that's a mix of a lot of things. It's got plenty of behind the scenes of Messi. It's got a lot of kind of the business of soccer and the business of Major League Soccer going into the board meetings of owners in Major League Soccer. And then I think, I always try to find the human side of things and to kind of bring to life who these people are that are making these decisions, what it's like when Messi shows up in your locker room, all those kind of human aspects. So I hope I hit on that as well. But I think, I tried to blend all three of those things into one book. And to your point, it was very challenging sometimes because things kept changing. And even at the very end, I had to pop down straight from DC at the World Cup draw down to MLS Cup to make sure I could be there for Messi winning MLS Cup, to add an epilogue to the book so that we didn't miss out on that moment in the Messi Effect.
And let me say, Paul was on the field from the final whistle on, so there's going to be some great details and color in there. There is, I believe, there's plenty of really excellent books written on around MLS. I believe there is truly one book that is a must-read for all MLS fans, whether you're new, old, or somewhere in the middle. It's Grant Wall's book on David Beckham and him coming here. Paul's book on Lionel Messi and how he's changed the league, that is going to be the second absolute must-read. He hates when I say this. He's the best American soccer writer we have, so if you have any interest in this topic, I promise you this will be time well spent reading this book. But we got to take one more quick break. We're going to be right back. We're going to shift the focus back to Tab. We're going to go inside the locker room with Tab Ramos. Once again, please rate, review, and subscribe to Inside American Soccer, wherever you get your podcast. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Inside American Soccer, and it's time to go inside the locker room. Tab, take us back to the 1990 World Cup. After we spoke about the magical game that was in Trinidad to qualify for the World Cup, now you get there and take it away.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually really interesting because, we have discussed, and many people have discussed over the years about how, beating Trinidad and winning that game and getting us for finally to a World Cup after 40 years of not having been in one. And as part of that, obviously, we always give sort of ourselves credit for being part of a generation of players that got us into this World Cup, and, how fun that was and how we overcame the challenges and all of the great things that make it for a great movie. But then the fact is, now you got to go and play it, right? And so, we got drawn up in a group with 3 European teams, and that's still not easy today. So you can imagine back then how difficult it was for players who we were really not even professionals. And so to not even be a professional player, to go play the World Cup was certainly a monumental task that we didn't even think about. So our first match was against Czechoslovakia, and this was a Czechoslovakia of Skaravi, who then played at Genoa, in European Cups and everything else. Bielik, who played at Betis. Well, they had a bunch of great players. Having said that, we were completely not prepared. I mean, if there was, I think terms like rude awakening are made because of things like this, right? I think those terms are put together because things like what happened to us actually happened. So we get on the field against the Czechoslovakian team, and we clearly don't belong in any category, physical, technical, speed of play, anything you can add to it, regardless of the preparation we had. We could have never prepared for what was about to happen to us. And, just being as naive as we were going into that game, we lost the game 5-1. We were down 3-0 at halftime. Eric Winalda had a red card, I think, the first couple of minutes of the second half, which obviously didn't help us get back in the game because now we had to play with 10. Paul Caligiuri actually scored a great goal to kind of get us back in it. But the Czechs were able to score 2 more goals and missed the penalty kick that Tony Meola saved late in the game, and still beat us 5-1. But okay, so I think I couldn't put us in a worse light in terms of, okay, this is our welcome back to a World Cup after 40 years. This is where we are. And Tom, you and I have discussed many times about how part of my own preparation to get to that World Cup was playing Sunday games in a Sunday league for the Brooklyn Italians. And by the way, playing in the Futsal World Cup, 6 months before in Holland that had, in the middle of qualifying. So, unfortunately, we had to deal with all these things. We're going into a world which, some of these guys were already playing in Serie A, which was like the NBA really of world football at the time. And so, but I think that the neat part of this is that I think, although no one ever talks about this game, I think that game is likely the turning point in U.S. soccer, right? Because at that point we realized, okay, we did something that no one thought we could do. We accomplished something no one thought we could accomplish. But now we're in the reality of, can our country ever compete in world football, right? And after taking a beating the way we did in the first game, it kind of, I wish you could have seen what trainings were like after that Czech game, because there were fist fights in practice. There was now everybody, what happens to normal teams? This is the growth of normal teams. You go out and get hammered, and now all 20 guys think they should be starting. So now you got to go into training. And that's the reality of what makes you better. And I always think that the guys that survive that are kind of the guys that kind of push us ahead, because we went from there to play against Italy in Rome. And as we're pulling up to the stadium in Rome, all we could see is Italian fans on the side giving us the double sign of 2 hands saying, today is going to be 10, right? That's what it was. That's what it was, because I think and the newspapers said the same. I think the World Cup record for goals was something like 9-1 that El Salvador lost some sort of game. And the newspapers were writing about how our next game was going to be the record-breaking game. And yet we pulled together, and that's the first time that I think we created the true American culture for who we were as a nation. Okay, so we're not good enough, but one thing we can do is we can fight, and we can fight all together. And I think we pulled together in that Italy game, and we ended up losing 1-0 in a tight game that we actually, by the way, didn't deserve, of course, but we could have tied at the end with a Peter Vermees shot that was saved by Walter Zenga right on the line, went under his legs. So I think that's the first time that we realized, you know what, this is really who we are. We have to improve as players, but we can fight like this, and if we can fight like this, we can do anything.
Let me just read off some of the names on that Italian team. You already said Walter Zenga, Paolo Maldini, Carlo Ancelotti, Roberto Baggio, Roberto Donadini, Roberto Mancini. And you guys played them one.
Well, and then you had Giannini. You had, I don't know if you mentioned Roberto Baggio. Baggio at the time, he was the highest transfer in the world.
23 years old for this
Scalacci,
tournament.
Toto Scalacci was the leading scorer in that whole World Cup. Actually, the game against us is the only game out of the whole World Cup where he didn't score. So no, Italy was a great team. And by the way, that Czechoslovakia team we lost to ended up losing in the quarterfinals to West Germany, who was the eventual champion. So it was really a turning point. It was a neat place to be. And out of the many experiences that I've had, I really and truly see that as a turning point for our national team.
Tab, I had a really interesting conversation after the last World Cup with Serginho Dest. And he talked about just the experience of being there, being around the whole world of football and seeing the level and the quality and also the joy around the game had inspired him for this next 4 years. Like, all he thought was like, I need to play well enough to get back to another World Cup. I wonder, you talked about it from the macro point of view of changing kind of American soccer and how the team came together to say, this has to be our identity to compete and grow. For you personally, when you're on the field against Czechoslovakia, the result goes the way it does. You see the quality of the players around you. How much did it personally motivate you for the next cycle and the rest of your career to say, okay, like, I have more I can get to. I have more I have to get to if I want to compete at the highest levels of this game?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because it was the number one motivator. It was, I want to get to that level. I want to play that fast. It's great that I have all the skill in the world, but if that skill is not developed to play at the highest speed possible, it's not useful. And so it motivated me personally. I ended up having a pretty good World Cup because then I got an offer from Spain after it, even though we didn't do well. But I think it didn't only motivate me, it motivated most of the team to think, hey, we can go do something. Just as, I'll give you the other side of that, I think some other players on the team potentially, and by the way, they were all great guys, but I think some other guys thought, this is probably not for me. And I think guys ended up going in separate ways. But for me personally, to answer your question, it was the number one motivator, knowing that, hey, I have to get to the next level if I'm ever going to make a difference in this game.
Awesome.
That's incredible. These stories never, ever get old, no matter how much Tab tries to downplay it. They are very funny and very good every time we talk about it. But I think that's it for our episode today. Tab, thank you as always. Paul, thank you for joining again. The Messi Effect, how the global legend
changed
the future of American soccer. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you for having me on, guys.
Available for pre-order wherever books are sold. I've said enough nice things to Paul. Paul is also on The Athletic, but read me on The Athletic. Don't read Paul because I'm feeling uncomfortable for all the nice things I said. Paul, thanks for being here.
No, thanks for having me. And yes, definitely read Tom. Don't read my stuff.
Well, I write at 300 words at a time. You write 700 pages at a time. So depends on what you want. There's two different people here.
For that reason alone.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to Inside American Soccer. Again, please rate, review, and subscribe. Please continue to leave your questions and comments on all of our platforms. We're on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and, of course, YouTube, where you can watch this show in its entirety, in video. You get to see Tab holding up the towel and making sure that nobody in his house is trying to steal it. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We'll see you all very, very soon.